A very troublesome yet unavoidable emotion that festers in video games is frustration, amplified several times over in player versus player titles. Frustration by definition is the feeling of being upset or annoyed, especially because of one's inability to change or achieve something. The second half is the key part, inability to change or achieve something. Everyone experiences frustration in their lives regularly, but in the world of competitive gaming, it would arguably be the one emotion that draws out the most reaction from players, even more than the satisfaction of winning. Unfortunately, it's rather challenging to find a PvP game that doesn't have a large number of players voicing scathing remarks about a playstyle, a character, an item, what have you. The Super Smash Bros. Community famously loves to denounce the existence of certain fighters for a multitude of reasons, but in one way or another, they always originate from the same root cause. They're frustrating to go up against, and this has occurred throughout the franchise's extensive lifespan dating all the way back to 64. Before I do though, I have an announcement to make. I got my first sponsor on Vars 3, and of course, it's none other than good old Raid Shadow Legends. Yep, they got their hands on me too. As I'm sure many of you know by now, Raid is a turn-based RPG that's available on iOS, Android, and PC with surprisingly detailed 3D graphics in terms of both characters and world environment. Just recently, they launched the new endgame dungeon, the Doom Tower, a 120-floor gauntlet that you get access to once reaching level 40. Every floor contains 3 waves of enemies, and every 10th floor you run into contains a boss. For example, one of the bosses is the Scarab King, who is basically invincible unless you lower his max health first, and without a shield buff, you're pretty much going to get one-shotted, so you have to gear up really well. It's one of the many things you can expect from this dungeon, and suffice to say, it'll take you a while to get through Doom Tower, especially considering it resets once a month. In other news, they have an upcoming summer event called the Path of Light, which entails 3 branching paths to explore with different rewards. On top of that, there's some new champions coming out and a set of skins for the amazing Trunda Guild Mallet. If you log on at least 7 days between now and July 20, you can get Deliana through a login event, a brand new HP type support champion. If you're interested in trying out a new game for the summer, consider using my QR code on screen and you'll get some cool bonuses worth $30. Rewards include a free epic champion named Virtus, 200k silver, 1 energy refill, 1 XP boost, and 1 ancient shard, so you can summon awesome champions as soon as you get in-game. And once you're in-game, you can use the promo code MyDeliana and find some extra stuff to help level up your champ once you get her. The link is also in the description below, so check it out if you have time. Thanks again to Raid for being the first sponsor on this channel, but for now, let's get back into it. In each installment, there's at least one fighter that comes to mind when you're asked to think about what character frustrates you the most. 64's Black Sheep would most likely go to Pikachu simply for being the most overtuned member of the roster, relatively speaking. Melee's biggest defense, according to the player base, would have to be the Ice Climbers, primarily due to wobbling. Although, at one point, Jigglypuff went through her own phase of defamation during Hungrybox's reign in the latter half of the 2010s. Brawl's competitive landscape was influenced single-handedly by Meta Knight for much of the same grounds as Pikachu in 64. He was so disproportionately overpowered compared to everyone else that no one came remotely close to his theoretical power level. Smash 4 was the first iteration to access DLC, and with it, the game's public enemy number 1 was rather fashionably late, emphasis on fashionable, Bayonetta. And now we arrive at Smash's latest version. Despite having a character lineup far exceeding any of its predecessors and maybe even future successors, prevailing sentiments have colloquially decided that Ultimate's roster is the most balanced in the series. The variance between the best characters and the worst is minuscule enough to where execution and game knowledge take precedence over movesets and attributes. Even with that, however, Ultimate is still a Smash game, so there's bound to be one or more that grinds people's gears enough for them to write a college dissertation on Twitter about why they should be banned. This became even more prevalent with the controversial release of Fighters Pass 2. While the unexpected yet monumental addition of its lineup featured names we never even imagined would make an appearance in a Nintendo game, much less Smash, the advent of units like Min Min, Steve, and by extension his companions, the Aegis and Kazuya, has led many in the competitive scene to second-guess if their inclusion has caused more harm than good. What exactly makes a character frustrating in the context of Smash anyway? Naturally, since frustration is predicated on emotions, everyone experiences it in different ways, so the criteria remains largely subjective and heavily biased towards one's personal experiences. In this scenario, the best way to find a mutual middle ground would be to find a recurring theme or something the majority of players have in common. For those who follow my main channel, Vars 1, you might have heard me discuss frustrating elements in that game, namely when talking about classes or champions. League of Legends, while different in format and gameplay than Smash, is still founded on competition, thus the factors that trigger frustration don't vary all that much. When you find yourself getting one-shotted by assassins or bulldozed on by juggernauts with very little you can do, it doesn't make for an enjoyable experience. Typically, what ends up driving a lot of players around the bend is the lack of agency they have when encountering adversity, and that ties back to the original definition of frustration, anger or annoyance, specifically because of your inability to change or achieve something. In this case, your inability to change the outcome of the situation. Going back to Smash Bros, as mentioned before, Ultimate in particular has as close to a balanced roster as we can get, especially considering how many characters there are. Yet that doesn't mean fighters don't have significant advantages over the other, and therein lies what makes something frustrating in this game. One of the first to enter the Hall of Infamy was Mr. Game & Watch. The buffs given to him from Smash 4 to Ultimate were significant enough to propel him from low mid-tier all the way to high tier, depending on who you ask, maybe even top 10. His notoriety stemmed from his moveset being deceptively strong in a certain way or multiple ways. An example out of many is his up B Fire, widely regarded as the best overall up B in the game for how far it sends him upwards, a startup of only frame 3 making it the fastest out of shield option, being invincible from frame 5 to 13, effectively making it unchallengeable for the first half of the attack, and it doesn't leave him in freefall, allowing him to act out of it. Additionally, his kit contains a lot of moves versatile in different scenarios, as well as a wide array of massively disjointed attacks uncommon to see on a character as small as him. What made him frustrating in the early days of Smash was that he had a lot of janky moves that were unreasonably effective in too many situations that most characters had limited answers to, sometimes none at all. Another that rose to prominence, especially circa Smash Online, was Sonic, a fighter who, true to his identity, is well known for his unparalleled mobility. Unlike traditional fighting games, which place an emphasis on precision, spacing, and airtight combo execution, platform fighters like Smash demand greater focus on positional awareness and movement, since closing out stocks requires that you send your opponent into the blast zone. Consequently, it's in your best interest to be as close to the blast zone as possible when landing attacks on your opponent, and as far away from the blast zone as possible when your opponent is landing attacks on you. Sonic's ability to close large distances on the ground and in the air at blinding speed not only makes him very difficult to catch, but difficult to run away from. Most of the time, approaching Sonic does nothing but expose yourself, and his arsenal of different engage tools and mix-ups causes him to be too unpredictable to react against when he decides to approach you. With the increased input delay of Wi-Fi, it gave Sonic a considerable advantage over just about everyone in the game. Even as we return to in-person events, Sonic is living proof of how much pressure you can exert just by being fast. Ironically, his extreme speed allows those playing him to adjust how fast or how slow they want to play the match. In Sonic's case, he was frustrating for many players in light of how he forced his opponent into a game tempo they were more often than not unhappy with. Those were two of the most well-known examples in the early years of Ultimate. Mind you, there are many others to a lesser extent, and once again everyone has their own personal grudges against certain fighters, but Sonic and Game & Watch were high-profile instances that everyone is well aware of. Thing is, widespread backlash towards these two was few and far between. Almost no one would go out of their way to voice how pleasant of an experience going up against them was, but they weren't rage-inducing, just annoying. For Game & Watch, you had to be aware of his weak points and periods of vulnerability. It was very straightforward otherwise. The matchup against Sonic is more a test of patience than anything else, and the community more or less acknowledged that. It wasn't until the advent of a few DLC fighters where the level of frustration began to escalate, the two most egregious being Kazuya and Minecraft's very own Steve, and this is where the whole lack of agency thing came into greater effect. Even though Kazuya came out after Steve, I want to go over him first. Out of respect for his home game, Sakurai remained loyal to his traditional moveset by importing quarter circle inputs and several input commands to give him one of the largest movesets of all time, possibly rivaling even transformation characters like Pokemon Trainer and the Aegis. That said, trying to incorporate a Tekken-style moveset into a platform fighter like Smash would inevitably lead to balance problems. I mean, with that many different attacks, you have a better chance of getting struck by lightning than to have a balanced character. Funnily enough, there's only one move in particular that's the source of everyone's grievances, or at the very least, that is the one move that shatters every preconception you have on fundamentals in Smash. Electric Wind God Fist. With a timing window of only 3 frames, pressing A at the end of down, forward, and diagonal down causes him to dash forward and uppercut, having full body and vulnerability for the entire startup that does 14% base while paralyzing opponents with significantly longer hit stun on his opponent. What are the implications of this? Rather than explain it to you, I think it's just better if I show you. Full disclosure, I'm a huge Riddles fan. He's one of the most enjoyable players to watch in Ultimate. Everything I'm saying is based on observation from as unbiased and objective of a perspective as I can have. Anyways, one Electric Wind God Fist can lead into a string of combos that, if you don't DI correctly, will lead to certain death. Now, 0 to death combos happen all the time in this game, but the reason people have more of a problem with Kazuya's is because ordinarily, 0 to death combos or crazy kill confirms tend to involve a chain of hard reads, immaculate situational awareness, resourceful use of platforms and/or items or combo extensions, or just straight up YOLO plays. Granted, in his defense, consistently landing perfect 0 to death chains is in and of itself a mechanical feat. You need robotic execution, but if and when you pull it off, there's virtually nothing your opponent can do. This alone would not be much of an issue if there was some other element of his gameplay that would counterproductively balance it out, but there really isn't any, not one that you can easily exploit. By no means am I saying Kazuya doesn't have weaknesses, he most certainly does. However, those weaknesses are not substantial enough to prevent him from being able to screw over anyone with just a single bad neutral interaction, and this is not even counting all the other things in his moveset, like his mountain of invincibility, shield piercing moves, and double-digit % kill attacks he has. Depending on what character you play, engaging in close quarters combat against a good Kazuya player is tantamount to a death sentence. The mere existence of Electric Wind God Fist is enough to totally change your perceptions of how to play Smash Bros. Then we have the man, the myth, the Minecraft, Steve. For the sake of conserving time, I'm just gonna TLDR all the reasons why people hate Steve. He's a zoner and a trapper with the frame data and combo game of a brawler and the range of a swordy. With his block storage mechanic, he has every bit of an incentive to not interact with you and store up materials. With his ability to instantiate platforms on demand in a platform fighting game, he can generate all kinds of intricate traps and situations that no one else, in not just Ultimate but Smash 4, Brawl, Melee, and 64 can even remotely emulate. All of his attacks have frame data comparable to someone like Fox or Mario, while having the range of someone like Lucina, and most notably of all, when equipped with diamond tools, he has the damage and kill power of Joker with Arsene. And no, I'm not exaggerating, diamond back air is literally Arsene back air, diamond forward smash is literally Arsene forward smash. Steve is generally the most unpredictable character to go up against, since he has such a vast array of janky yet powerful attacks that can throw you off your game depending on how proficient the Steve player is at mixing things up, and because he can create his own platforms, there's no limit to how many things he can pull off. Again, for the sake of time, we're just gonna leave it at that. If you want to know more about why people hate Steve, just go on Twitter or search up VODs of Steve and competitive. In short, Steve and Kazuya don't follow the conventional rules of Smash according to the consensus of many players, including top ones. You might be asking me, how exactly does this make them frustrating to deal with? PvP games, or rather any player versus player environment like sports, are all about moves and counter moves. The actions you take actively and passively influence the thought process and subsequent actions of your opponent, and the actions they take actively and passively influence your thought process and subsequent actions. Loss of agency and the frustration that follows happens when one player has more control in this dance, so to speak, than the other. Now, a lot of different factors lead to this scenario. Their character can simply be stronger than yours, like Captain Falcon versus Ganondorf, or Mario versus Dr. Mario. They might have a favorable matchup into you, like Fox versus Sephiroth, or the way their kit is designed forces you into playing the match in a certain way. The third one is the most aggravating for many players to experience. You have to play the game their way, by their rules, and at their pace. Ultimately, Smash Bros is a game, and the point of a video game is to have fun, right? Obviously in competitive, players want to win, but the reason they play in the first place is because they enjoy the game. That's what it boils down to. Even though they're all vying to be better than everyone else, they still want to have a fun time doing it. Going up against these types of players inherently stifles their enjoyment, which is further worsened if and when they lose to those characters. It's one thing to get dumpstered on because your opponent simply outplayed you, it's another to lose by being thrown into a situation where you have zero control over the outcome. From a casual standpoint, it's nothing short of incredible for us to have Cloud face off against Sephiroth outside of a Square Enix product, or for Kazuya to duke it out with Ryu and Ken in a fighting game totally unrelated to either of their original titles. No one can deny that, and it's a large part of why Ultimate has been so commercially successful, but empirical data shows DLC fighters having more negative consequences for the competitive scene based on past and present results. Personally, I'm not as much of a doomsayer as most people on Twitter, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't understand where they're coming from. The basis of competition is that you play to win the game. Therefore, I believe it's both illogical and groundless for players to be criticized for how they win the game, when that's the whole point of playing Smash Bros on a competitive level. That's the whole point of playing any PvP game on a competitive level. As long as you're not making use of illicit methods such as aimbot, hack clients, abusing exploits, or unintended features, there's nothing morally right or wrong about how you make it to the top. If the means to achieve victory through a certain way exists, then it's entirely allowed and should not be a source of shame or criticism. That's the fundamental essence of competition. However, there is a certain catch-22 that emerges from this kind of dynamic. Negativity bias, in tandem with you being on the receiving end of a character's potential, results in people intrinsically viewing things in a bad light. It's kind of hard to appreciate how creative Steve's moveset is in Smash Bros when that creative moveset is being used to whoop your ass in bracket. All the same, it's impossible to write off everyone's complaints about these types of characters as just them being salty. That's only a valid statement if a game was entirely predicated on player skill, and while to an extent that's true, no one can disavow the notion of fighters having innate advantages against the roster, especially DLC ones. Objectively speaking, Steve, Kazuya, Terry, Minmin, the Aegis, etc. have privileges that, while perhaps canonical to their games of origin, don't transfer over to Smash in a way that's healthy for competition, and that's what's so frustrating about them for many players. It would be one thing if everyone had Mythra's Foresight or everyone had Joker's Arsene, but they don't, only those two have it. Therefore, the idea that privilege is at least somewhat responsible for the outcome of a match cannot be ignored. Unfortunately, like it or not, unless Sakurai goes back on his word, these frustrating characters are here to stay as they are, no more balance patches, so time to buckle down and learn the matchup. On the subject of learning the matchup, a lot of anger towards these characters has to do with the lack of experience. With enough time, players can and will adapt. I think what Fighters Pass 1 and 2 have done is necessitate the use of secondary counterpicks more than ever, which is awesome for spectators because that means we can watch all our favorite top-level contenders play multiple fighters. One of the most annoying things about Ultimate is that there are so many freaking characters in this game, but one of the most exciting things about Ultimate is that there are so many freaking characters in this game. We have the pleasure of witnessing all kinds of different cast members. If it means having to deal with a few so-called bad apples, then I'm all for it. Anyways, what are your thoughts on frustrating characters in Smash? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments down below. We're gonna end it off here though, so if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and feel free to check out my Why No One Plays series if you haven't yet. For now though, thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.